Is this going to end with us putting our next treasure out there and we'll do what Justin did? Is that how this is going to end? The most pathetic treasure ever?
Woo! Welcome back to the Hunt for Posey's Treasure. This is episode 2. Date of recording is May 7th, 2025. When we last spoke with you, it was our debut episode, which was more of a prologue than really a chapter 1. We laid out the details of who we are, why we're here, and what the hell you can expect from this podcast. So we hope you've kind of made sense and caught up. With that said, I'm going to turn to my co-host, the Cowboy, and I got to ask you, Cowboy, any breakthroughs this week? What's going on with your latest solve?
Oh, breakthroughs indeed. Actually, no real big breakthroughs. Been marinating on our conversation last week, and I have some thoughts. I think that some of what I was going down the rabbit hole on, which I'm sure we'll get into, was exactly that, a rabbit hole. But some of the stuff I'm convinced we'll get into it, but there's a couple of things you and I were texting about this week that I think, and I don't know if we're even going to share some of this stuff. I mean, that's kind of the next question in this podcast. Are we just open books here? Are we giving all of our secrets away? Because there was one thing we were talking about that I was quite excited about, but I'll let you decide on how far we take it. But yes, exciting week, good week. I mean, every week that the treasure hasn't been found is a good week for us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the week because we haven't found it yet, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
But that said, yes, indeed, rabbit holes, wormholes, vortexes. There's a lot of holes in this story, yes, in this subject matter that we are certainly exploring, trying to fill ourselves. That said, to answer your question, are we revealing all of our cards? I think I touched on this in the opening, but, I'm going to be real. There's some, secret documents that are lining up behind the scenes trying to solve this. We're finding this treasure. That is not just some shtick. I'm not out here like phoning it in. I'm trying to crack the cipher. I'm trying to find my first solve, but, full disclosure, I don't even think I have a comprehensive solve of like, okay, I'd be ready to explore this yet. I think it's really, in between episodes while we're working on stuff, probably won't share that. But after I've fleshed out some ideas, and if I can't find anywhere to go from there, I say we lay it all out there. We get it open. We explore. We share the knowledge and collectively maybe make some sense out of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. There is one thing that I am working on that is a massive task, once you find something, whether it's like a clue, maybe you notice something in the Netflix documentary and you're like, oh shit, that might be relevant. But then the hard part is you have to then narrow it down to the Western United States, which is, I think the trick is finding exactly where this damn treasure is going to be trickier than I guess thought it would be before we started this podcast. But yes, there's one thing that I'm working on that is taking a lot of time, is very cumbersome, checking the maps, you could say. And that's kind of where my bandwidth is right now in my search for it.
I mean, I think you really kind of illuminated something in me, and that I do think kind of the focus and title of this episode perhaps could be just like beginnings, starting points, because I think that is one of the most overwhelming things with this hunt that I've discovered so far is like, where do you start? You have to make a choice at some point. You have to choose, am I going to dive into just the poem? Am I going to dive into the book? Am I going to dive into the documentary? Am I going to dive into social media? As I said, there's so many holes to explore. I don't know. It sounds like for you right now, you're focused on one of the clues potentially from the film, whereas with me, as I said at the closing of our opening episode, I'm right now focused on trying to crack this poem. Obviously, it's words on a page that could have been interpreted many different ways, but Justin has alluded to the fact that there's a cipher, which we're going to dive into a little bit more details about what that could mean today. But I have this feeling in my mind that you look at this poem a certain way. You find a certain light or perspective or shifting the words, or you do something and it's gonna all of a sudden, like one of those fucking things you would look at in high school that you'd have on the wall. You couldn't see anything, and then all of a sudden there's a 3D whale just staring at you. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I loved those images. I went cross-eyed many times looking at them. But I think what you're getting, I mean, I hear what you're saying completely. Yes, the poem, of course, it's all in the poem. But there is this second step that comes with, okay, you decipher the poem. You still, I mean, I don't think, however, this 3D image that you're explaining, it's not going to give you coordinates. It's not going to give you may be able to figure out, I think, what, like the general themes or like the landmark structures or certain pieces of what he's trying to get at. But the issue is that then you have to apply that to a map. You have to apply that to some kind of physical representation of where this thing is. And that is the hard part. That's where there's two sets of work. There's the decipher, and then there's the actual finding it on a map. And then the third part is actually going and finding it, right? It's a 3-part process.
Yeah, solving the rest of it, because as we'll touch on, you have to you can't just literally go on Google Earth and then, oh, I've solved the XYZ. I have every line of the poem checked off, and this is it. I found it within, a few meters. No, you're going to have to, at some point, commit to going there and seeking out the rest of it. BOTG, as they say online, which took me a while to figure out, embarrassingly. Boots on the ground.
Oh, good. Thank you for sharing that, because I didn't know what that meant either.
All right, so we covered a ton of the base details last episode, but there was still so much left off. So the focus of today's episode is, I think, going to finally bring to conclusion the prologue, the exposition, the facts of the story, the case that you're going to need. If you're not following along at all, you're brand new to this, I hope that you're going to have kind of a comprehensive understanding of where we are, what the rules are, and what can disqualify. I think is really important is to understand these kind of check marks. Like, to be frank, my wife earlier this week had very impassioned telling me, I know where it is. Like, she was ready, wanting to book me a flight because she doesn't want to go out there. And I'm like, look, you need to explain the solve, break it down for me. And then she started doing it, and I was like, oh, well, you're breaking this rule, you're breaking this rule, and it's kind of putting a strain on my relationship at this point. Are you there yet?
No, I've actually kept this from my significant other. I don't want her to think I'm crazier than I already am. So this is our little secret.
You don't want her to get the fucking treasure, dude. You're not going to share it with her, bro.
We don't have to say that. She's not going to get any of that Bitcoin wallet, baby.
All right, well, that said, we're going to dive into the tab. If you are on the treasure.quest website, the official website of Beyond the Map's Edge, which for legal disclaimers has no connection to this podcast, these hosts, or anything that we're discussing on this podcast. We're going to go from the bottom up. And this announcements button, in terms of the navigation, that's like kind of the first big one. And this is where he's going to post the official updates, addendums to the rules of the game. So first and foremost, we talked about Tucker, the trusty dog, last time, alluded to the fact that Justin was thwarted in his attempt to use Tucker to sniff out copper when he was trying to find Forrest Fenn's treasure. And that was because there was no dogs allowed in Yellowstone. Well, he's clarified here. Can I bring my dog? If your dog is the outdoors type, absolutely. So that's an interesting tidbit there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that his dog, as we said in the first episode, I have a lot of respect for Justin from the beginning because he trained his dog to sniff bronze or copper, to sniff copper, right? Which is, I think, just an incredible thing. I mean, I think there's no way in hell that he would create a hunt in which you couldn't bring your dog. I mean, I don't think I'm not like a big dog. I don't know dog breeds all that well, but it may be tough. Yeah, like a Chihuahua, maybe like a Shih Tzu. Like, those might not be the right dogs for the great western United States expanse and, say, the Rocky Mountains. But if you got a Labrador or a Retriever or some Husky, some big old boy, some thick boy, if I had a dog, which you do, and I'm surprised you haven't started training Little Bear to start sniffing copper, I would do the same thing. And I think that this is definitely going to be rooted somehow in the dog. I think that's definitely like my guiding light, my North Star is there's some connection with the dog here. It's that dog was so amazing. I have so much love for that dog. The dog is a big part of this. So.
Well, connection to the dog aside, in terms of clues, in terms of significance, to go back to your point, why aren't I training my dog to sniff stuff out? I got to imagine Justin, in designing this, wouldn't have left that as a potential means for discovering this treasure. For one, he hasn't revealed anything about the receptacle in which the treasure is stored, so we don't know the material. Whereas with Forrest, I think that was revealed. So I imagine, and there's actually, I believe we're going to cover some of the quotes today that touch on this, but he said some really interesting things when it comes to what is the treasure stored in, or how will I know when I found it? So there's a lot of theories around that, but my contention is that this isn't going to be something that a dog can sniff out.
Oh, really? Really? Really, really, really? You think that? You are underestimating canine smelling abilities then, my friend.
Well, what do you train it with? Gold? Can dogs find gold? What if it's an airtight, 5 inches thick receptacle?
Okay, well, yeah.
And I don't want to go on too many tangents here, but one of the things I thought is they have metal detectors. What about some sort of thing that can detect a electronic signal? Because we know we got that Bitcoin wallet in there.
Yeah, but is that putting out an electrical signal? Like a SSD drive doesn't put out an electrical signal, does it?
I think it does some sort of tiny, minute level of, electromagnetic pulse.
Yeah, but I feel like there's also a lot of electromagnetic pulses found naturally in nature.
Ooh. See, this is why you're here.
I love where your mind's at. But I think, I don't know, we know what's in the case. And then what you're saying is possibly the receptacle is either smell proof or yeah, that could be. That could totally be. I guess it's a little more complex than Forrest Fenn's situation when he had just this old box that had, an old chest that it was in, that probably had copper on the chest, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. Well, I guess my question is, do you know, what are these hints and these clues? Please tell me. I don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about. Is he giving something away? There's just something I should know.
Well, we're going to go on. So this is just from the first one, which is about the dog. That's what I'm saying. Look how much we were able to unpack just from that. Look at this rabbit hole we've now stumbled upon. But yeah, back to the announcements page. This was his first set of announcements. This was March 31st, 2025. So, is an advanced degree or deep technical knowledge needed to solve this poem? His response is, I've done my best to design this in a way that is accessible by anybody. You don't need any advanced degrees, thank God. Any reasonable person that spends a bit of time researching online and getting a baseline understanding of me, Justin Posey, is on equal footing.
A baseline understanding of me. Okay, well then it all goes back. I mean, then the logical thing is yeah, we've talked about the dog, which is clearly on the baseline understanding of who he is. He's a dog lover. He had a wonderful dog. Something with this dog, I think, that's what I'm holding on to. But beyond that, there's the obvious, his family. He's got deep ties to the Arizona area. I believe he grew up there. And that would obviously qualifies as a baseline understanding of who he is. So, I mean, that's kind of where my mind is.
Spent a lot of time in Montana, in Wyoming. There's a lot of locations mentioned in this book, which I'm making my way through.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, again, the rabbit hole is wide. It is a wide hole.
Mm-hmm. So then he says, some people are saying they're finding code in the website. Is that necessary? He says, that sounds like fun, but no, there's no hidden clues in the website code that would require advanced knowledge. So touching on the previous point. Okay, here. One of the most important clarifications. But again, sometimes the clarifications causes more confusion or potential in my mind, but are the poem clues in consecutive order? His answer is just a stern yes. So if you're looking at the poem and you're wondering, do I need to reshuffle the stanzas or reorder the lines? To me, this indicates no, that is not the case, right?
Yes, I think so. You're a deeper poem guy than I.
Well, yes, as you can tell.
Frankly.
You know me well, sir.
Yeah.
One of the theories I came up with, which, here's me revealing one of my cards on my hand, my theory is potentially, what if you read the poem in reverse order? So if you all have access to the poem, if not, go to treasure.quest, hit that poem button. If you go in and read it from the bottom stanza to the top, it almost reads in a way, to me, that makes more sense. It flows better. It feels better. But again, is that confirmation bias? Is that just accident? He wrote the poem and it rhymes one way. Of course it's going to rhyme the other. I don't know. But then it begs the question, is that considered consecutive order? In my mind, I think it still does. Consecutive doesn't indicate ascending or descending. It just means one, then the other, then the other. Right? Or no?
Yeah, I agree. When you initially, several weeks back, had posed the idea of it being flipped on itself and reading it from the bottom to the top, that really got me excited. I went very hard the other way, and I personally think it reads more naturally from bottom to top than top to bottom. It also, at the time, I was looking at a piece of the map that included a few of the things that he's alluding to, and I was like, oh, this makes sense. And then I read it backwards and it made even more sense. I've since moved off that location, but I still think that there's something there. I think it's very clever. I didn't think of it until you had mentioned it, and when I started reading it from bottom to top, it really kind of, pun intended, flipped it on its head for me.
Yeah, and what I think is cool about this whole process is you can come up with this theory, and then a few days later, I saw on the subreddit, somebody posted the exact theory. And so I'm not the only one out there that's feeling that. But again, it's like, is that a red herring I've created for myself? And now I'm going to create a whole solve, but it's predicated on the poem being read backwards. It's kind of a risk. So it's just one of those like seeds I've planted. Like, okay, when I'm working on a solve or looking at something, maybe consider reversing it. That said, let's move on to the next announcement. Is the treasure buried? Here we go. So it was in here. Is the treasure buried? His answer, if you know where to go, it wouldn't matter either way. What?
Yeah, what? Okay. What the hell does that mean? If you know where to go, it wouldn't matter either way. That makes me think like it. I don't know. The answer implies like kind of like it's an unclear answer, which makes me think like a cave maybe.
But he talked about, we said in the rules was it's not in caves where the treasure is not. One of them was in caves underwater, that type of thing. So yeah, my take is he's alluded to this multiple times. There's some other quotes we'll stumble upon, I don't know, this episode or future, where he's talked about location, receptacle, that type of thing, like the physical aspect of where the treasure itself is when you find the location. I just think it's going to be like abundantly apparent of like, oh my God, and like, I don't know, maybe it's not under a boulder. I don't think so, like those fellas were looking at for fens. But I think it's going to be something kind of like readily apparent to where it all just like makes sense. But then I also think this kind of supports the idea like a dog's not going to be able to sniff it out. If it's, in this matter, it's just going to be like, you found it. But I don't know. This to me is like such a nebulous type of response and question there that it's burning a hole in my brain.
Yeah, I agree that it's going to be one of those things that you just immediately understand and get. Like as soon as we know where it is, it's going to all make sense. It'll be an aha moment.
Yes. And again, we've talked about the checkpoint. One of the core questions I outlined at the end of our first episode is, where does the checkpoint occur? Maybe the checkpoint is literally when you find the thing, but I don't believe that's the case. But that said, moving on, are dangerous water crossings required? Nothing dangerous is required. And if you think back to Forest Fen's treasure, that did require crossing a stream that was about waist high with water. So I would imagine this is less intense. I think he would have classified that as potentially dangerous if something like that was involved. Or do you disagree?
I agree. It almost makes me think the way that answer is posed is that like, it could be a simple yes/no question, because if it's landlocked, it's a no. But because he says it's not a dangerous crossing, maybe that means there's a boat involved. Maybe it's like an island. Maybe it's like you actually have to go somewhere. That I don't know. That's kind of what I perceive that to be, which is fascinating.
You have to ferry to the location, perhaps.
Ferry or take a boat. Yeah, ferry I guess would be it.
Can someone find it without using the map on the website/book? The map is useful, is his response.
The map is useful.
So that begs the question, if you look at the map, there are a handful of locations written out on the map. Are those on purpose? Or are those red herrings? What about the map is useful?
This is the map on his website, right? Right when you land on the homepage?
Yeah, and it's also in the book as well.
It's a beautiful map, by the way.
Yeah,
I think it's a very pretty map.
But heads up, for those of you who want to really analyze that, from my understanding, the map was done by a third-party illustrator who has no knowledge at all of the location. So if you're trying to see like, oh, there's clues, I don't believe so. He hasn't indicated that. But, there's no right or wrong answers, really, other than things that he's ruled out specifically and explicitly. So moving on, will the solution take you to an exact spot or a general area? If you've solved the poem in its entirety, you'll end up at an exact location, which kind of, buttons up with the previous one of like, you'll know when you're there.
Yeah, and it kind of adds emphasis to the poem also. Like, you don't need more than that. The poem is all you need. If you solve the poem properly, I don't know if we're done with all these little things, but this seems like a good cipher conversation because the cipher it is directly related to the poem.
And we're actually going to get to that in 2 questions.
Okay.
This one is when I read this, this was, I think, what really made me commit to like, okay, I'm going to get involved in this. And actually not that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and find this treasure when I read this one. How far from your car do you need to go? You don't need to hike a great distance. You don't need to hike more than a mile to figure out where the treasure is at.
That means, it's either near a road. I mean,
yeah,
but a mile's not like a mile's a mile, man. Like if you drop a point and you have to walk a mile in a 360 degree direction, you go any which way. I mean, that's still like a giant area,
True. And the thing about Fenn's treasure is it was only, I think they said, 500 meters from the closest road. And so it's not something that, you're going to have to be off grid for a full day, which I think is cool. But when we dive into the answer, Cowboy, this struck me, is he doesn't say you don't need to hike more than a mile to locate the treasure or to access the treasure. It is you don't need to hike more than a mile to figure out where the treasure is at. So perhaps you hike a mile and then all of a sudden you see the bride, the double arcs on granite. You find the checkpoint. Maybe, I don't know. It's like there's a lot in between the words here.
Yeah. I'm literally on a map just searching right now. And I don't even know where to start. It's so hard.
So we'll let that marinate in that brain ears. But as we move on, now we're going to talk about the cipher here a little bit. Are advanced ciphers needed? He says, there is one hint that I couldn't help but adding that could arguably require a slight bit of technical knowledge. It's not a critical hint, but there is one thing. So, like, what? What does that mean?
Wait, read that again for me, because read that again, because that's a deep one.
Yeah. So, are advanced ciphers needed? There's one hint that I couldn't help but adding that could arguably require a slight bit of technical knowledge. It's not a critical hint, but there is one thing. First thing my mind goes to is like her foot of 3 at 20 degrees. Is that the technical thing? Or maybe it's just not even there. It's you got to use like Morse code or something to decipher the poem.
Yeah. The foot of 3, 20 degree thing is something that I've thought quite a bit about. I think that the easy thing is foot of 3 is a yard, right?
Yeah.
That's like the obvious thing. Yeah. I'm trying to, the foot of 3, I think, trying to think about like 3-legged creatures. I don't know.
But anyways, so he's saying though, there's some sort of clue to cracking this thing that you're going to maybe need to get a little bit technical, but I'm going to jump ahead. This is actually from a second set of announcements that we will get to, but while we're on the topic of the cipher, I really want to flesh this out. So Other questions he responded to, it's a similar question. Is there a cipher or a technical clue? He says, there are two elements at play. One is a cipher, but it's not advanced. It is very approachable. The other element arguably could require a bit of technical know-how, but there are other ways to uncover that would require very minimal technical knowledge. It's not a super critical clue. And then they say, is the cipher in the poem or the book? And he says, I haven't specified. Bro.
But he's saying the cipher's out. He's published the cipher in some capacity.
Yes. And, to define cipher, for those who are out there, it is a secret or disguised way of writing, a code. So effectively, it's a way to translate what's on the page to a completely different meaning via an objective kind of process, whether it's like, okay, every time there's the letter V, it's actually a letter J, and so forth and so forth. And then you replace all those letters and you get a brand new sentence. That's one type of cipher. Those are kind of classic ones. In the Forrest Fenn documentary, they allude to Thomas Jefferson, I guess, had a cipher that he would use to send messages back in the colonial times. So that's really what we're dealing with. It's out there. He hasn't specified if it's in the book or it's in the poem, but it's out there.
I really got to buy the book. I think we made an agreement last podcast that you got the ebook. I should actually right now order the book.
You did.
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
But that said, yeah, so much to dive into with this, and the word choice is so careful, and there's so many kind of ways to read it initially where you have assumptions, and then you reread it and you say, wait a minute, because he's being very careful, and these are written words. These aren't just like responses he's blurting out. But that said, let's move on. Are there any intentional red herrings? No. So he's not purposely trying to confuse you or put fake hints in there. How many gold coins are in the treasure? There are many gold coins, almost exclusively 1 ounce or larger. Almost everything in the treasure is gold. The container is filled to the gills with treasure. Filled to the gills? Is it like a fucking tackle box?
Fish?
Is it like shaped like a fish?
Ooh, interesting. Filled to the gills.
These choices of words are driving me mad!
Well, filled to the gills just rhymes, too. It might just be a rhyme.
I guess, but to use that figure of speech?
Yeah, I've never actually heard somebody say filled to the gills. Have you?
Yeah. No. The gills.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no.
No,
Yeah,
I have not.
I haven't heard that either, and I come from a long line of fishermen. I've never heard filled to the gills.
Yeah. So, again, if you're out there, we're open to theories. I told you the email, thehuntforposiestreasure@gmail.com. Obviously, there's no apostrophe in that because it's an email. Send us your theories. We'll explore them. Unless they're really fucking stupid, then we might make fun of you. But that said, it'll be in good fun. But let's move on. Another crucial clarification here. Okay? Can we access the location 24/7? And he said, as of March 31st at 8:10 p.m. Central Time, 2025, yes. So if you're working on a solve, check the road access. Is it accessible? That was the thing that ultimately the wife, when she was coming at me hard and angry and telling me, I said, okay, is the road open? And she found out the road that would be like the only way to access this location currently closed because there's a great deal of snow, which we will touch on. And so that can kind of rule out a solve.
Yeah. I mean, that I think could eliminate a lot of national park, right? Because a lot of roads, there's obviously closures at when the sun goes down. National parks close typically unless you have some kind of permit or something, which it sounds like you don't have to have. You know what I mean? I think it's probably on public land, but not like an actual national park that has gates. You know what I mean?
Well, if that didn't rule out certain national parks, the next one will, because the next question is, do you have to pay to get into the location? And he says, no, not as of today. So that rules out quite a bit of national and state parks, which require payment to enter.
Okay, fair. Good point. Touche. Okay.
And this one I think is cool for all of you listeners out there, because or I guess for the people that aren't listening to this podcast, it's cool. Will you give the complete solve after it has been found? And he says, I don't see why I wouldn't. It would be maddening to not know the solution. But don't worry, if Justin doesn't, we'll share exactly how we ultimately found this thing once we do find it.
Good. Yes, we will. Of course we will. Why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, once we find it, yes.
I mean, if someone like cheated and found it, then maybe we'll rehash what Justin says, how it works or whatever.
Is this going to end with us putting our next treasure out there and we'll do what Justin did? Is that how this is going to end? The most pathetic treasure ever?
Woo! I don't know. Let's move on, though. Did the Beyond the Maps Edge LLC transfer from Texas to Wyoming? Look, people are out there looking at fucking everything. We're not just weirdos like on the podcast, dude. There is an army of folks in the United States that are trying to find this treasure. And his answer, though, was no. The LLC was established from day one in Wyoming, so nothing to read into there, apparently. Can it be found in wintertime? Is it year-round accessible? And he says, I don't want anyone doing anything dangerous. If there's snowy conditions, you aren't going to have any luck. Completely avoid searching in the snow or any bitter cold conditions. What's most important is keeping this hunt safe. So one way to interpret that is if there's snow, you're in the wrong place. The other is if there's snow, it's obscuring clues or the location. Which camp are you in?
I mean, I definitely think that there's no snow involved. It makes me think that it's not in a place that snows, that you need to worry about snow.
Interesting.
That's just my opinion. And it makes sense because, essentially, if you look at the map, the Western United States, I mean, I don't know, half of that, 40% of that map is covered in snow for half the year, almost, especially in the northern states, like Montana and I mean, to me, my personal opinion is that it completely eliminates certain states, certain places,
Yeah, I mean, I go back to intentional red herrings, and he said no, but then one of his answers we just touched on was, is it accessible 24/7? And he said, as of this date, it is. I feel like if it were in a location where that road the next day could be snowed out, I don't know if he was going to give that answer because that kind of could mislead some people, but it's tough. So that's one of the big questions here is the snow element.
That's one of the biggest clues, I think. I think that's one of the biggest, broadest clues. Really, it is. It's kind of undeniable how important that is.
That's in the eye of the beholder. I'm kind of with you. I was initially 100% oh, there's no snow, baby. It's not anywhere with snow. But as I've read it more and more, I'm I don't know. Maybe because I know last time around, for Yellowstone, he was talking about in the documentary, he would watch the snow melts and kind of know when to go look. But I think with this, I'm with you. If I had to guess and, gun to my head pick, I think it's somewhere there's no snow and that it's going to be available year round. He wants people searching for this year round, not like a seasonal thing. But next question, which ties back to what we've talked about here, the location, the receptacle, is the treasure hidden? He says, the container will be immediately recognizable, and no, it isn't Fenn's chess replica. You don't need any knowledge of the Fenn treasure hunt to be successful here. So immediately recognizable, you're going to be at the exact spot if you find the clues. Is the treasure buried? He said, if you know where to go, it wouldn't matter. So where does this all lead us?
Again, right back at the start to the poem, baby. I feel like that's where it all goes.
To the gills. I don't know. And then how many hints are in the series? The series being Gold and Greed, The Hunt for Forrest Fenn's Treasure on Netflix. He says there are several sprinkled throughout. I had zero creative control over the process. I was a participant. I didn't know what scenes would be edited out. I didn't know what would be in focus or in frame. I didn't know the scene ordering. So it was a unique challenge. He says, not everything ended up in the series that I had hoped, but there are some really good hints in there.
Yeah, we have a couple of theories around that. That's one of the big projects I'm working on is one of the images in that I think has a clue that could be incredibly important. But again, it's literally finding a needle in the Western United States haystack. And I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if I'm doing the right thing.
You know, you find a thread, you follow it till it runs out of yarn type of thing. And that's where we're at right now. But yes, I'm glad he said this, because I was one of the responses I feel like on Reddit when I would reply to people and other people is like, that's what you need to realize. He didn't edit this doc. He didn't make the doc. He had no idea what's going to be in there. So like people were like, oh, the times on the clock when he's being interviewed are this, and it's like, he didn't cut that interview. He wasn't going to know like, oh, they're going to cut to me when the clock strikes 12:15 type of thing. Like they do show him winding the clock. I will admit that. So maybe that matters. One of the main things that people believe is a clue in the doc is he's unlocking a safe and he's entering numbers and they're clearly in focus. But like if he said here, they didn't know if it would be in order. Maybe they don't even show all the numbers. So to me, I believe, it has to be something in the environment like that he knew if they were going to be putting a camera on him, you would see it. The other thing is maybe it's something he said. So
yeah, I think there's probably like an audio component. He said something that is indicated at it, multiple things. Of course, I would imagine that. And I think there's probably also visual components as well.
Yeah, there's a litany. That's an episode in and of itself that I'm sure we will dive into. But to move on, what is a better reference, the series or the book? The book is a better resource, but there are great things in the series too. Is it necessary to research my family? My being Justin. I do speak about my family in the book. That being said, you do not need to track down friends and family. They cannot help you as they have no additional knowledge. If your brother was still here, would you still have done the hunt? Probably yes. The hunt in part is a tribute to him. His untimely passing did make me resolute in starting the treasure hunt. We alluded to it last week. Spoilers here for those who haven't seen the doc. It's kind of a bittersweet story about how in the process of trying to find Fenn's treasure, his brother Brandon joined him. They were together at 9 Mile Hole, almost discovered it together, but tragically, as time passed, his brother ultimately ended up taking his own life. And so his brother's a significant figure in his life. And as we hear in this response, he sounds like he still would have done this. This is something he was determined to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that it's impossible for me to separate the tragedy and like the kind of like the full circle nature of him now doing his own treasure hunt. It's impossible for me to separate the two.
Yeah, there has to be some connection, I believe, to the brother, to a memory, to something, in a tribute sense, obviously, something beautiful, I think, and poignant.
Yes. And he seems like man, it's hard for me to find the right word, but he seems like somebody that it would be impossible for him not to, and rightfully so. That's good for him, that he should. So that's just what I think, but yeah.
And then now, again, one of the ones, circled 20 times, one of the biggest clues that he's added here, addendums, we've touched on it. It was one of the core questions. That's the checkpoint. So he says, is there any sort of clue verification built into your poem? And he says, there is a checkpoint that will give you zero doubt that you are trending in the right direction. But as we said, he said nothing beyond that. He said, is that something you can find online? Is that something you have to be boots on the ground? This, that, and the other. Where are you at with that?
The checkpoint is really an interesting thing. And I'm curious why, Why have a checkpoint? That's a new variation to the treasure hunt that Forrest Fenn didn't do. Why have a checkpoint? And I guess maybe we should start with that. I don't know why. Do you have a theory on why there would be a checkpoint?
I believe, and it's kind of a widely held a belief that I found, that I don't know anyone who would argue against it. But what I've understood, and we'll dive into this, I think it's next episode or coming up, we're going to go into some of the interviews he's done. He's done an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, some other publications, podcasts, that type of thing. But he's touched on the fact that one of the aspects of the Fenn treasure hunt that did frustrate him was the fact that it didn't have this exact thing, that he could be 200 meters from the treasure and have no sort of verification that like you're on the right track, which that does feel a little unfair. That's frustrating. So to me, I believe that he's kind of done this to avoid that. He wants to reward someone that's piecing this together. Like, yes, you're on the right track. You're getting closer. Keep going. But from there, that just begs so many other questions. But finally, to clarify, I guess from what I've read, that aspect of the poem that was meant to do so was Forrest says, like, find the blaze in your quest to cease. And the blaze markers were these markers they put in trees and forestry. Well, I guess the blaze markers were completely gone on the tree that were originally placed there because, as we said, it took 10 years. I think the tree itself ultimately fell down. So my understanding, my contention is that that's what this is about. It's something that would kind of avoid that situation for this go round.
Totally makes sense. Okay, now that you've said that, I agree. And I think that's probably what his intention is with this. And God bless him, because I feel for him.
And this discussion's already running long, so I'm not going to dive into this, but I will plant this question in your mind, Cowboy, and in the minds of our listeners, is if that's the case, he wants a checkpoint, he wants something there. You got to imagine it's something that's somewhat semi-permanent, something that some asshole couldn't come and find and be like, fuck all the other searchers, I'm going to destroy this. Like, it's not going to be like a road sign because those change all the time over years. The civic people are going to change that. I think it's going to be something like significant, like a landmark or some natural thing that's just like, it's a checkpoint that was put there by God type of thing. But that, again, I don't want to dive too much into it, but if you have a thought on that, I'm just planting that seed, baby.
That's interesting, but then how do you know that you've found the checkpoint? Because he says, like, unequivocally, you'll know when you find it.
I mean, what if you go and it's like double arcs on granite bold and there's just like a straight up like McDonald's double arch out of granite and it's all lining up, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Wow, the McDonald's reference, arches of gold, wow.
We're open for sponsorships if you're out there.
Yes, fascinating. Okay, yeah, I'm on board. Okay, yeah, I would agree that it's probably not a road sign or like carved in something. It's got to probably be a little bit more substantial.
I shouldn't have even said that because the next question is, he rules that out. Can you rule out any structures? He says the treasure is not associated with any man-made structure. It is not hidden at a structure. You don't need to touch a structure. So it exists in nature.
Okay. Well, that reaffirms the idea that it's probably something natural.
How much of this is solvable from home? He says a fair amount. Is there a distinction between a clue and a hint? No, I treat them as synonymous terms. Does the series contain hints that help with the book? There are some hints in the series that will guide you in the book.
There are some hints in the series that will... Yeah, I mean, I got to get the book, man.
That leads me to, he talks about in the doc, like one of the big unlocks, literally the thing that like unlocked it all for him was as he was starting to think about 9 Mile Hole. There's a photograph in the book that Forrest Fenn published to help with his search that featured this boulder that his grandfather was in front of holding these fish, and that was literally where you had to go. That was one of the points in the poem, so maybe he's telling you, look at the photos in his book. Obviously, that's where everyone's going. The first thing I did when I bought the ebook was literally flip through every page and look at the photos to be like, does anything stand out? It does not, but I mean, I'm still going to be diving into those fuckers.
Yeah, a lot of cross-checking in our near future here. I got to get the book, though. It's hard. Yeah, I got to get the book. I owe you that.
And then there's a quote. The location that whispers of personal lore and secrets, end quote. Is it true to say the person that finds the treasure will come to know what those secrets are? I think so, yes. And that was it for the first big block of announcements from March 31st, 2025.
Okay, so we've ran through the announcements. We're painting a clear picture. Probably has something to do with his family's background. Probably has something to do with no snow. It's very close, relatively close to a road. Probably has something to do with water or some kind of interaction with water in some capacity. That's what I got. That's all I got.
The water, is that from the Guild's remark or where's that? I'm curious.
The water was from the idea that like you don't have to dangerously cross water. When he posed the question, is it near water, on water? He said you don't. He didn't give the yes or no. He was basically saying like, it's not going to be hard to, or you know what I mean. Like that's
interesting.
That's what I took away from it.
All right. Well, you said we covered all the announcements. That is incorrect because a few days later on April 2nd, he had another announcement. I don't plan to answer any more specific treasure-related questions in the immediate future. I'm going to go on to doubt that because there's several other clarifications following this. But he says, I think I've said all I want to say. A few people have reached out early to ask for an interview, and I am almost done with those interviews, all of which will be available publicly, which some of them have already released. As I said, we will dive into them. But it says, how can I ask you a question or tell you my solution? I'm not answering any questions privately. I don't want anyone to get the impression I'm giving out private hints. I will not confirm or deny any solution to anyone. When you find the treasure, you will find clear instructions on how to proceed. And then he links to an article, which we will cover in the next episode. It was with mysteriouswritings.com. The title is Justin Posey, 6 Questions on Beyond the Map's Edge Treasure Hunt. Stay tuned for that. We're going to dive into that one next week. But beyond that, on April 3rd, he also shared an interview with, it's a YouTube interview by the channel Estes Quest. I apologize if I am mispronouncing that. ESTE''S Quest. He did a 27-minute interview on that podcast, so I'm going to go ahead, pull the transcript. We'll dive into some of the nuggets from that. And then on April 9th is when he did his interviews with The Hollywood Reporter and with Treasure Hunt with Us. The main high-level clarifications from that is a specialized vehicle needed to find the treasure? You don't need a high clearance vehicle to find the treasure. We've talked about that. Thank God I got a fucking 2012 Corolla. I know you. I think you drive a Corolla too, baby. So we're good.
I drive a Subaru. Thank you.
Oh, or a Camry? What happened to your Toyota, baby?
Oh, it died a long time ago. That was back in grad school. I drove that thing. No, I got a Subaru.
Is it a high clearance Subaru?
Definitely not. No. But it's all-wheel drive. I've taken that bad boy through Tahoe and some snow. But not that it's relevant in this case,
okay.
Obviously. But
so we're ready.
I'm ready.
Who knows where the treasure is hidden? No one knows but me. Where's the box? Who says it's in a box? Do I need to be boots on the ground to see the checkpoint? I haven't specified. We've talked about this. Are there clues in every story? Not every story has a clue. Do you have a favorite story? The Postal Pilgrimage, which was interesting. That's one of the chapters I skipped ahead and have read. We'll talk about that maybe at some point, but nothing emergent from that. Is the treasure hidden outside the mapped search area? No. Which, back to our core questions. God damn, I really distilled it in that first episode because we just keep coming back to them. Beyond the map's edge, what does it mean? Obviously, he's saying it doesn't mean, if the border shows half of New Mexico is on the east, is out of that, then it's not going to be there, even though it's called Beyond the Map's Edge. But what does that mean then?
I have no idea. What do you think?
Same. That's where I'm at.
Yeah,
but I've heard some interesting theories. Was the clock actually moving during the filming of the series? It was set to 4:19 for quite a few scenes. That was a bit uncanny. Maybe they were just getting ready to blaze up for that 4:20 or something,
Damn right, baby.
You talk about the compass. This is from the book, and I think it's like the prologue or the acknowledgement section. He talks about like his 4 points of a compass, and he references Brandon, his brother, Tucker, his dog, his father, and his grandfather. So they say, you talk about the compass with Brandon, Tucker, your dad, and your grandpa. But on the website, it says Tucker, Brandon, your dad, and your grandpa. So I guess a slightly different order. Do they each designate a specific side of the compass? And he says, anything related to that, I think the book is a better reference. So I guess the order is then from the book is Brandon, Tucker, dad, grandpa.
Huh.
That's all I can derive from that.
What the hell does that mean?
I don't know, man. Regarding the 4 points of the compass, do each of the points define the starting point, the bride, the babbling brook, and the exact spot you're seeking? He says, I have to punt on that.
Whoa.
Yeah. How hard was it to bury the treasure with a broken leg? So I guess, over the course of the time he was hiding this treasure, he had a broken femur or something. He says, I haven't specified whether or not it's buried. It took at least 4 trips from a vehicle, and no, it wasn't my car.
Hey, a boat maybe?
And then was the question about the technical or the cipher clue, which we skipped ahead and touched on already. So that was April 9th. On April 19th, he clarified that an audiobook has been requested a lot, and he's pleased to announce it will be available in a few weeks. He says, this format will also allow me to address one of the most mysterious places of the map. Something many of you have been asking about. What? Do we have to get the fucking ebook now?
Probably. Wait, what is he saying? Mysterious places of the map? What the hell does that mean?
Allow me to address one of the most mysterious places of the map. We're gonna, again, the early parts of this show is gonna be a lot of questions, but I'm telling you, as time goes on, we will be giving you answers.
I hope so.
Maybe they're not the right answers, but I'll figure out some answers.
Yeah, wow. That's, God, another thing to buy. Maybe since you got the ebook and I'm getting the book, then you get this next one, and then I'll get the next one.
Yeah, we'll just keep back and forth. That said, now we're on to the final or penultimate clarification, or announcement, and this is going to conclude our episode really here, is on May 4th, 2025, 3 days prior to recording this episode, he says, based on a recent email reply to a nice man named Mark regarding a road closure due to maintenance, I want to clarify the accessibility rules for the hunt. So listen carefully there, Cowboy. Areas that are legally accessible to the public as of today, May 4th, 2025, are valid hunt locations, even if they require longer hikes due to road closures, have seasonal road access restrictions, or involve temporary maintenance-related detours.
Okay.
That wrinkles it. That wrinkles things up real nasty in my mind. Because the whole, oh, you can get to it a mile from the car, or, oh, it's accessible now, like maybe the main road's closed and you got to do some crazy detour.
Oh, yeah. It's like, how do you even just get your footing, you know? You got to solve the
I don't
problem,
know,
baby.
but then he goes on to clarify that treasure is hidden on publicly accessible land. The focus is on legal accessibility of the final location, not convenience of access. Safety must always be your top priority. Weather conditions, extreme temperatures, snow coverage, or other environmental factors may make certain approaches temporarily unsafe or inadvisable. No treasure is worth risking your personal safety. In summary, if you can legally reach the spot, regardless of how challenging the journey might be at certain times, it remains a valid hunt location. So maybe I got to apologize to my wife and I'm in for it tonight. I don't know. That said, she's going to probably have to listen to this podcast to hear that. As noted on the legal page, quote, while the location could be legally accessed at the time of abandonment, aka when he left it, participants are solely responsible for determining current access rights and obtaining any required permits or permissions. Land status and access rights may change over time. I'm receiving many questions about this particular topic, so let me be crystal clear. That was in bold. The treasure is in a location that is legally accessible to the public. It is not on private property or any location that requires special permission, insider knowledge, or breaking any laws to access.
Okay. Public land. Boom. There it is.
That was your takeaway.
That was it. Yeah. What do you got?
This whole accessible, I think the whole idea that like, oh, if it's snow, it's out. I think this really throws that shit out the window.
Oh, yeah. That part. Yeah, for sure. I think, now I don't know what I'm talking about. Now I have to change my approach when I'm looking at these maps. And you have to have a conversation with your wife.
Yeah. Well, we each got stuff we got to do. That said, the final update was yesterday, May 6th, 2025. He went on a podcast. Now, wasn't this podcast?
What?
But he went on a podcast called the American Treasure Podcast, and he gave an interview.
Wow.
And it was, enough for him to link here. I believe that was the last interview he had lined up. So next episode, we're going to be diving into those interviews. But that's really in terms of like the rules of the game, the clarifications of the rules. We've laid it out here in episodes 1 and 2. We've exhausted the material that's on the official website. So as I've said from the outset, I wanted to set the ground rules. I wanted to set the facts. Like when you're writing a fucking script, baby, you need to get that exposition out there. And that's what we've done here, right?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like now we can dive a little deeper.
Yeah, I mean, we've done Act 1, kind of, so to speak. We're ready to go down this hole, disappear into one of these holes, maybe come out with some gold, maybe come out with something else covered in us. I don't know, but I hope you all listening are going to be alongside for that journey.
100%. And yeah, we're going to have a long Act 2 and a quick short act in the third act there when we find the damn treasure.
Yes. That said, to conclude this episode, I'm going to ask you a question, Cowboy. Based off everything you've heard so far, where are you starting? Like, where's your baseline? What's your touchstone? What's your first solve? What direction are you headed?
I'm headed south.
Interesting.
I think this is a southern state. I'm unwavering off of the snow conversation, even with his conditions. And he did say extreme temperatures, which is an interesting thing to say. And I'm thinking south. I'm thinking something that has to do with his family, possibly in the Southwest. That's where I'm starting. What about you?
I mean, under essential gear, which I'm not going to dive into that list, but one of the things listed is sun protection, sunscreen, sunglasses, hat. But, I mean, you need that in the cold too. But maybe you don't. I don't know. But where I'm at, we've talked about cards on the table. I've been coy. I've kind of, teased some things. Where I'm at is, as of now, I said from the onset, you got to kind of pick a direction and start there. You got to have a touchstone to go off of. So my jumping off point is a firm belief that I'm focused on the state of Arizona. Why Arizona? That's where he was raised. That's where the formative years of his life were spent. Yes, many, many experiences were spent with his, family outside. So I'm not saying if you're looking in Montana, I think you're wrong. I totally think there's tons of valid solves out there. Where I'm at, I'm focused on Arizona. I'm focused on looking at it through that lens. And, conveniently enough, we could hop in that Subaru and get out to Arizona tomorrow once I do get something lined up.
Yes. And that's close to us, so let's drive out there. The problem is it's about to get really hot out there in the next couple of months.
Well, we got time I don't got to solve yet, baby. But that's where I'm started.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm following the subreddits. I'm checking the emails. Send us your questions, your thoughts. As we said, like, subscribe. We'll be bringing you these every week until this quest is completed. But that said, that is going to conclude episode 2 here on the hunt for Posey's treasure. Final thoughts from the Cowboy.
I'm excited to find this thing. I've got maps open right now. As soon as we start talking about this, it's hard for me to stop my search and just focus on a conversation, because now that we're talking, I'm looking at topographical maps, baby. I'm looking at everything. I'm in. What about you? How are you feeling?
I'm with you. I start diving, and then I want to start recording. So I know one of the kind of trepidations about starting a podcast is are we going to have enough to talk about? And I mean, I had 3 other things on our agenda for this episode, and we didn't even get to them. So much to unpack. Thank you all who are with us here from these early onset. And thank you all if you're late to the game and catching up on the catalog. We love you. We're glad you're here. We will talk to you next week. And until then, happy hunting.
Good luck and stay safe.